Chapter 4. Two Passions, Two Dreams. One morning after lining up in the schoolyard, my friend John Wasson approached me, and in an excited voice he said, "Dude, did you see the new Kiss album?" I said, "What new Kiss album? You mean Creatures?" John grabbed me by the shoulders and replied, "No, it's called Lick It Up, and they took their makeup off." My face went white. "What did you just say?" was my only response. Wasson replied, "Dude, I got the album last night. They took their makeup off." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not only was there a new Kiss album out with new music I'd never heard of, but they took their makeup off. Just then, our third grade teacher, Miss Vining, stood in front of the class with that same stern look she always gave us every morning, as if to say, "That's enough, I'm here, and it's time to behave." I couldn't stop thinking about what Wasson had told me. What did Kiss look like without their makeup? Did they still have crazy superhero-type costumes? Did the music sound the same? I just knew I had to get to the mall immediately to see this new album. Plus, I had to scrape up enough money to buy it. I also had to get wrestling tickets for the new WWF event at the Garden later that month. Lucky for me, it was December, and Christmas was just around the corner. After spending the next 8 miserable hours in school trying to think of how to tell my mom that I needed my Christmas gifts early so I can go buy the new Kiss album and get tickets for WWF, the bell finally rang. I jetted home as fast as I could and ran to the kitchen to see her. After a long, hard sales pitch, my mom said yes. I really have no idea how she did it all the time. We never had any money, but somehow every time I really wanted something, she found a way to get it for me. I called one of my best buddies, Rob Scally, to ask him if he wanted to come to the mall with me to buy the new Kiss album and if he wanted to go see wrestling with me later that month at Madison Square Garden. I'd been trying to sell this wrestling thing to all my friends at school ever since seeing it for the first time on TV. I'm not sure Scally was that into it, but he asked his mom if he could go, and she said yes. I met Scal, that's what I called him for short, on my corner, and we quickly booked it to the mall. Along the way, we talked about wrestling, and I also explained to him about the new Kiss album and the fact that they'd taken their makeup off. Now he was excited too, because at that point, nobody had ever seen the band without their makeup. Once we got to the mall, I had to make a decision. Do I grab the wrestling tickets as we walk in to assure better seats, or do I run straight for the Kiss album? It was close, but first, I had to see what Kiss looked like without their makeup. Scal and I bolted at top speed to Sam Goody's. Since Scally at that time was much skinnier and way faster than I was, he got there first. But because I was so familiar with the store, I beelined straight to the new release section. That's when I saw it. If it wasn't for the Kiss logo in the top left corner and for a picture of someone sticking out his tongue, I would never even known it was Kiss. The cover featured 4 regular-looking guys in street clothes standing in front of a plain white background. It was the exact opposite of the Creatures of the Night cover that had blown me away a year earlier. In fact, it was very disappointing. Scally finally made his way over to me, and the first thing he said was, "That's Kiss?" Of course, I bought the album anyway, but my excitement and being in awe of my idols faded a little bit at that moment. We left Sam Goody a little down, but quickly remembered that we still had to go buy our wrestling tickets. We once again ran top speed to the downstairs entrance where Ticketron was. I don't think as kids we really ever walked anywhere, especially when we were excited. We approached the ticket window and slapped down our money and said, "Give us the best tickets you have for WWF at the Garden for December 26th. The ticket agent took our money and printed our tickets. We looked at the numbers on the tickets but didn't know how to figure out where the seats were. So we asked him to show us. To our disappointment, our section was way up in the nosebleed seats again. Scally gave me a slap on the shoulder and said, "See, we should have gotten the tickets before buying that Kiss album." I hate to say it, but after looking down at my plain white Kiss album with 4 ordinary-looking guys on it, maybe Scal was right. Over the next few weeks, I really tried to get Scally into wrestling. He would come over and watch on Saturday mornings, and I taught him about each guy and about the difference between the good guys and the bad guys. He was definitely enjoying it with me, but I quickly realized that no one had the same passion or excitement as I did for the things that I loved. This would be a common occurrence throughout my life. The day had arrived. All the way to MSG on the train, Scally and I faked wrestled. Every time we would get too rough, my mom would give me a quick knock it off look, mainly because she didn't want me to hurt Scally. You see, when I was 9, I was very large for my age, about 5'6" and 125 pounds. I know that doesn't sound big, but when all the other kids are about 4'7" and only 70 pounds, it made a huge difference. Scally was probably even smaller than that, which is actually what made wrestling with him so great. I could do all the moves the real wrestlers did on him, including body slam, suplex, and Samoan drop. Once we got to the Garden, I knew more of what to expect. As soon as we entered, I hunted down the guy with the programs and quickly bought one to see the matches on the card that night. Yes, I exclaimed. The Superfly was fighting again, and tonight in a tag team match. Superfly and Bob Backlund's manager, Arnold Skaaland, versus the Intercontinental Champion, the Magnificent Morocco, and his manager, Captain Lou Albano. Yes! I'd watched this feud develop every Saturday morning on Channel 9. A feud that epitomized everything about good and evil for a wrestling fan. I couldn't believe I was going to get to see them go at it in person. Then finally, it was time for the WWF champion Bob Backlund to defend his title against the evil Iron Sheik. Much like the Snooker Morocco feud, I've been watching this one develop on Saturday mornings. The Iron Sheik was a cocky Iranian who despised everything about America and Americans. He always boasted about how he was an Olympic wrestler in Iran and was stronger than any American wrestler. Every week, the Sheik would do a test of strength using 2 75-pound Persian clubs, offering anyone $2,000 to swing the massive clubs above their heads as many times as he could, and no one ever even came close. The Saturday morning right before the Sheik's title match at the Garden, he began his challenge again, calling for anyone to come out and try to swing his Persian clubs. Suddenly, from behind the curtain sprang WWF champion Bob Backlund. The Sheik and his manager, classy Freddie Blassie, seemed insulted that Backlund would even attempt the feat of strength. Backlund entered the ring and approached the clubs. The Sheik and Blassie stood behind, looking smug and arrogant, knowing this skinny American had no chance of defeating the Sheik. Bob proceeded to lift the clubs over his head. He seemed to struggle at first, but once in the rhythm, he looked like he could actually beat the Sheik. Just before surpassing the Sheik's number of swings, the Sheik attacked Backlund from behind, causing one of the heavy clubs to land squarely on his back. The Sheik and Blassie left the injured Backlund face down in the ring as they smugly walked back through the curtain. They knew that with Backlund injured, they just gained a massive advantage in the upcoming title match. The title match at the Garden that night lasted just under 12 minutes. I knew the end was near when the Sheik got the injured Backlund into his finishing maneuver, the dreaded camel clutch. The painful maneuver consisted of the Iron Sheik sitting on top of the competitor's back and then wrenching his neck backward with all of his might. Anyone else might have immediately tapped out with such a brutal move, but not the champ. Backlund refused to give up, even though he was in excruciating pain. With his back injury, the move was likely causing permanent damage, so finally, Backlund's manager stood on the ring apron and threw in the white towel. This was a signal to the ref that he was giving up on behalf of Backlund and, in essence, forfeiting the WWF title. I couldn't believe my eyes. Backlund had been champ for almost 6 years, and now it was all over. The evil Iron Sheik had the championship. Scally and I left the arena that night absolutely devastated as the Sheik and Blassie celebrated it in the ring to an arena full of boos. Who could possibly save us from the tyranny of the Sheik and his vile manager, Freddie Blassie? I moped around for the next 2 weeks. Looking back, it's pretty funny, but for a 9-year-old, this was a tough time. First, Kiss had taken off their makeup, and now the WWF had a champion that I loathed. I reluctantly plopped myself in front of the TV on Saturday, January 7th to tune into wrestling. Bob Backlund, still not 100% from his injuries sustained by the Sheik, was set to face off against Samoan number 3, Samu. The Wild Samoans always appeared together, and this day was no different. Samu was accompanied by his brothers, Alpha and Seeker, and their manager, Captain Lou Albano. Every time Backlund tried to enter the ring, the Samoans would surround him. He was clearly outnumbered. Maybe when he was fully healthy, he would have been able to take on 2 Samoans, but never 3. Backlund left the ring disgruntled. He seemed to simply quit the match due to the unfair circumstances. Moments later, he came back followed by an enormous man exploding through the curtain behind him. It was someone I'd never seen before on WWF television, but I did recognize this behemoth. It was Thunderlips from the movie Rocky III. What was he doing here? I was immediately excited to see what would happen next. Backlund seemed to have brought this man the announcer called Hulk Hogan as backup against the Samoans. The match began and Backlund quickly gained the upper hand, but just as Backlund feared, the Wild Samoans interfered and began stomping on him. The man they called the Incredible Hulk stormed the ring and single-handedly took out all 3 Samoans and Captain Lou. This was the most exciting thing I'd seen on wrestling yet. The Hulk's energy was off the charts and absolutely exhilarating. The Samoans quickly fled the scene as the announcer came out to interview Backlund and the mysterious Hulk Hogan. As exciting as the Hulk's antics in the ring were, he was even more explosive when he spoke on the microphone. He began ripping off his t-shirt and proclaimed, "Hulkamania's here!" I was instantly hooked and had a new hero to root for. The next week, it was announced that Backlund was too injured for his rematch against the Sheik at the Garden that January. Instead, Hulk Hogan would step into the match and take Backlund's place for the championship. When I heard them make this earth-shattering announcement, I lost my mind. I could not miss this for anything in the world. My new hero, Hulk Hogan, was about to get revenge for his friend Bob Backlund against the Iron Sheik. And this was all happening 2 days after my 10th birthday. I once again had to beg my mom to get me tickets for my birthday. On January 23rd, 1984, my mom, my brother, Scally, and I once again went to the Garden to see WWF wrestling. The undercard was pretty much a blur because all I could think about was Hogan getting his hands on the Sheik. The smug Sheik strutted down the aisle wearing his signature red and white turban, followed by his disgusting American trader manager, Freddie Blassie. Suddenly, there was a sound in the arena I hadn't heard before. A loud guitar chug started playing through the speakers that hung high in the rafters. I recognized the song right away. It was Eye of the Tiger from Rocky III. This was the first time I'd heard a wrestler come to the ring with entrance music, and it added even more excitement and more anticipation to Hogan's entry. After a few bars, Hogan came bursting through the curtain like a wildfire. Pandemonium broke loose inside Madison Square Garden. The Hulk didn't even wait for the Sheik to take his turban and robe off. As soon as the bell rang, Hogan was pounding him with punches and kicks. Hogan was in complete control of the champion until the Sheik finally caught him with one of his Iranian boots, the one with a large spike on the tip, with which he famously kicked his opponents. I never understood how this was even legal. I was outraged. One kick from the boot and Hogan went down. He was weakening his back to set Hogan up for the devastating camel clutch that had defeated Backlund just a month earlier. Scally and I began screaming to Hogan to warn him of what the Sheik was doing. Unfortunately, we were once again in the nosebleed seats, and our hero Hogan couldn't heed our warning. Finally, after a few minutes of pounding on the small of Hogan's back, the Sheik locked in the camel clutch in the center of the ring. I screamed in horror, "No!" knowing full well that it was over. Nobody ever escaped from the camel clutch. Hogan was in excruciating pain, and it was only a matter of time before he gave up. Scally and I were devastated. The ref kept asking him if he was going to give up, but Hogan didn't respond. At least not until I saw his 2 index fingers begin to wave back and forth, as if to say, "No, no, no." Hogan began to shake and reach down inside for some sort of extra internal power. Somehow, he muscled his legs back underneath him and gained leverage. Moments later, he was getting to his feet as the Sheik held onto his back. The Hulk began to shake more and finally slammed the Sheik back into the turnbuckle, sending the Iranian down like a ton of bricks. The crowd went wild. Hogan slung himself into the ropes, bounced off, then flew into the air to deliver his massive leg drop. He got on top of the Sheik, hooked his leg, and the ref counted 1, 2, 3. It was over. In 5 minutes and 40 seconds, Hulk Hogan had become the new WWF champion. Scally and I was screaming and hugging with joy. Even my mom, who didn't really care about wrestling, was clapping. Hulkamania was running wild. I now had the building blocks of what would be my dreams and goals for the rest of my life. Seeing Kiss and hearing Peter Criss play his drums changed me. Now, nearly 5 years later, watching Hulk Hogan win the WWF Championship had also changed me. Now that I had two very distinct goals and ambitions in life, becoming a drummer and becoming a wrestler, it was time to get serious. I already had a full room dedicated to my drums, but how was I going to train to become a wrestler? I thought to myself, I need a wrestling ring, but obviously buying one was out of the question. And back in the 80s, there were no professional wrestling schools to train to become a pro wrestler. Not that I knew of. I didn't know what to do. I explored amateur-type wrestling to get started. The problem was that even though I was only 10 years old, I was very big. Because of my size, they wanted me to wrestle in my weight class, which meant high school kids. I thought, sure, why not? But my mom wasn't having it. She didn't want her 10-year-old baby boy fighting kids 15 and 16 years old. So what could I do? Finally, it occurred to me. I would get wrestling mats and cover my other spare room with them. I just had to wait till the next holiday to ask for the mats as a present. If it wasn't for Christmas and my birthday, I'd never have been able to do anything. So until Christmas rolled back around, I'd have to wait to start my training to become a professional wrestler.